Welcome to the Underground, the Steel City Underground, the black and gold standard for Pittsburgh Steelers coverage. Now, here's your host, Terry Fletcher.
Hello, everyone, and here is our Week 9 episode of WTF, and my name is Terry Fletcher. Thank you for joining us this week. Yes, our Pittsburgh Steelers are on a bye, but there's lots going on in the league, and so things that we can't even believe that happened this weekend. So we thought we'd get it started first. Let's give a shout out to our sponsor, Total Sports Enterprises, Pittsburgh's home for autographed memorabilia. You can find them locally at your store, or you can shop online at tseshop.com. So we appreciate them as one of our sponsors here at Steel City Underground. So a couple of things that happened this week, which I just find to be interesting, is that I felt like I was watching one of the MMA fights. So, you see that UFC, everybody was excited about that on Saturday night. I personally don't get into watching people kill each other on, screen. I prefer to watch them kind of beat each other up with football uniforms on. And so when I'm seeing this play out, I just couldn't believe myself when I'm seeing how many players were getting ejected this weekend. And, Hassan Reddick, Carlos Hyde, Frosty Rucker, all ejected after a fight broke out in the Cardinals 49ers game. And then you move to the Cincinnati game with Jaguars, and A.J. Green and Jalen Ramsey were ejected. And that was interesting because you see kind of, Jalen Ramsey kind of went over and did a little push, and then you see A.J. Green just come over and just tackle him around the neck. And I mean, I couldn't believe that he did that. And then he threw a couple of punches, and from what even Antonio Brown tweeted out, that's not AJ, that's not AJ. He doesn't do that. So something else has got to be going on. So it was just kind of sad to see, but we had some ejections. I think the thing that probably gets me the most when we talk about, these ejections and everything is that, not only the penalties that they do to their, for their team, that's always a problem, but, we found out today that those ejections did not cause for suspensions. So they're getting thrown out of a game, but they're not getting suspended in the game. I mean, that's just bizarre to me. And then you continue to look as as these stories are kind of beefing up and they're talking about them and trying to figure out what's going on. And you find out that, then they came back in the one Tampa Bay game, and Mike Evans, and Machar Lattimore were now getting into it. Just a ton of star-powered fights. And then you see that, Jameis Winston, actually, he was one of the instigators in one of the fights. And I don't really know what's going on with him. That guy he's like freaking me out a little bit. If you ever get a chance to go back and look at some of the video over the weekend. Now, he got hurt in the game, so he was pulled out. And it was just weird to see his pre-game, I guess, rah-rah speech to his players, where I know what he was trying to say. He was trying to say that, we're going to eat wins, but he's shoving fingers in his mouth. And, you should have seen his players like, dude, what are you doing? It just kind of gave me flashbacks to that whole crab legs, stealing thing he did, right out of college before he was drafted. But, between that and then instigating a fight, he's got some mental issues that he just needs to get over, and realize that it's about the team. There's just no leadership with him. He just needs to, really understand that if you're going to lead this team, then, he's pushing players, taunting it. He needs to scale it back and, really try to lead his team, because he's been in the league long enough now. What is it, like 4 or 5 years? And he's just out there. I don't really know what's going on. Even looking at more, arguments or fights, the Jaguars won. They're kind of trampling over a lot of teams, mostly because of their defense, as we saw, in Pittsburgh not too long ago. But there was a clip this weekend of Blake Bortles and Coach Doug Marrone yelling at each other after they're getting a win at the side of the field. I mean, they were going at it pretty big, so I was expecting some punches thrown there as well. But, I mean, just I think the one of the things that really drive me crazy is the lack of respect that some of these players have for their coaches, and just really, I don't know, they just kind of seem to go off the board a little bit. We see, when Ben gets frustrated, he definitely, I don't want to say gets in Todd Haley or Mike Tomlin's face, but it seems like he goes over and has a conversation. Heated, sure, but it seems like it's a heated discussion because they're both on the same page about something that happened in the game that they're not happy about. For example, and this is another one of my WTFs that just drive me insane, where we were in the last game that we were playing in, and Mike Tomlin asked for a timeout at halftime, and he didn't get it. He said, as soon as the play's dead, I'm going to get a timeout. Well, the referee didn't give it to him. And then we see on Sunday Night Football with Pete Carroll in Seattle, he basically runs onto the field. He's almost halfway on the field, on the green, on the grass, running down the field. He does it all the time to ask for his timeout. And it's just, you sit there and you're just like, dude, how come it's okay for him to do that? But it's not okay for our coach to ask for it before and have it honored. So just throughout the league, there's so many inconsistencies. First with the fighting and no suspensions, but other people get suspended, and then with the fines, the one kick we found out from Burfict, he finally got a fine and it was like $9,000. But Mike Mitchell makes a hard, hit on somebody and it wasn't dirty or anything, and he gets, close to 40,000. And especially when you see the habitual person, like in Vontaze Burfict hurting somebody. And it just is amazing to me how the inconsistencies are there. So that's my big kind of soapbox WTF this week, just between the fighting and the penalties and what coaches are allowed and not allowed to do, and what they give them. It's just amazing to me. It's almost frustrating. You just really don't understand, what the heck is going on there, and who makes those calls. I know that the commissioner has been given a lot of, very, I guess, a lot of leeway from the collective bargaining agreement. But, there was another punch thrown, by number 97 of the Raiders in their game, and he wasn't ejected. So, he only got a penalty. And you saw that right on TV, you saw him throw 2 punches. So some hits are ejection worthy and some aren't. And it's really just kind of interesting to me just to see all this happen and play out, and then you see the after effect, and there's just no consistency. So I'll get off that now, but it really kind of frosts my cookies here, just to really kind of always seeing that happen, because you want to at least, the players should at least go into it knowing when they go into a game, what the response is going to be if you do something. But the players don't. Why do you think they're fined so differently? Because and why do they continue to do the behavior? Because they're like, well, I might get fined, or I might not get fined, or I don't play for that team who seems to be targeted, or last week that was only 9,000 for this player. It might have been 50 for that player, but that player always gets this or that. And so, as a player, talk about, not knowing what's going to happen, and you just kind of wait. You're just kind of waiting to see, what the heck happens, and if they'll get any kind of fine or suspension or whatever. So anyway, just keep an eye on all those things, because it's interesting just to see what the league is really just not doing, and it just is crazy to me. So moving on in some of the other kind of WTF happenings, and I think one of the ones that I was really surprised was in the Atlanta game, where they lost again, and there was a wide open Julio Jones in the end zone, and Matt Ryan throws him the ball, and this play he has to make, and he makes it 9 times out of 10. This guy just doesn't miss, and he dropped it. He actually had one of the most egregious drops that I've ever think a wide receiver of his caliber has ever had, and he'll never live it down. Obviously, after the fact, we hear Matt Ryan say, you just move on from it, but that's going to be replayed forever. I think one of the things we were looking at as far as the Seattle game, which definitely was a game, you're sitting there thinking, the defense is just got to win this game. And, Russell Wilson does everything he possibly can to win this game. And then their kicker, Blair Walsh, misses the ball, misses 3 field goals, and they end up losing, 17-14. And it's just sad to me, because that is the same kicker We know how long ago, a couple years back, I think it was either 13 or 14, where in the freezing cold bowl, we call it was really cold. And it was the game winning field goal to get the Vikings into the playoffs, and he missed it. And so you just sit there and go, oh my gosh, how is it possible that you could miss all three? You could just tell he just kept hooking them. They just weren't going in. And it was crazy. But staying with kickers, and that brings us to, people need to get off the Kirk Cousins train. He's an okay quarterback that gets lucky. I mean, that 17-14, he got lucky. If even one of those were made, it would have been a tie, and then they would have gone into overtime. So it makes me crazy. People are like, oh, Mr. Clutch. No, he's not. Stop. So, again, that's my opinion. But since I'm running the show today, I can say that I've heard all my other colleagues give their opinion on things. And I'm sure I'm going to get some hate comments on that, by the way. I see a lot of my Twitter feed saying, oh, with Ben possibly retiring next year, then wouldn't we love to have Kirk Cousins? And my answer is no. First of all, he's been tagged twice at $20 million, and so he's going to want at least 20. And he's going to want a long-term contract, and he's just not that caliber. If he was cheaper, by half, then maybe. But I don't see I don't see the Steelers going out and paying for a quarterback like that. Which again, he's respectable. Do I think he's out of 32 starting quarterbacks in the league, do I think he's a top 15? He's probably never 15 for me. So, in Steelers organization, that's not what they want. They want a top 10 quarterback. So, for people who are saying that to me, every time I hear that, the WTF hair on the back of my neck just stands up. So hopefully people are trying to move on beyond that. But just coming back to the kicker. So we're watching the game this weekend, and we're sitting there looking at, Miami, and I'm sitting there thinking, okay, well, this is kind of an interesting game. We've got a Miami kicker that recovered his own onside kick. And, that was sitting there. You could see Jack Del Rio at the side, the coach for the Raiders. He just shook his head and went, what was that? It was very cool to watch. I mean, he recovered his own onside kick, but Del Rio's like, we cannot let that happen. That is just absolutely unacceptable to let that happen. And so, just to see that play out was pretty funny. So it was pretty funny looking at that game as well, or looking at a couple of different games over the weekend. We saw some interesting, touchdown celebrations. So one that was pretty funny was in Kansas City when Kelsey made a touchdown. He and two of his buddies, his players with him, they did potato sack races in celebration. They fell down quick, and then he made it to the end. But that was actually cute. I thought that was a good one. On the Titans, apparently somebody was, shouting out to Dick LeBeau in a throwback. They did My Girl Temptation, by the Temptations dance. And if you weren't born in the 50s and 60s, you would have missed it. But you're like, oh, I see what that is. So that was kind of funny. That was really cute. One of the things that just as we're talking about all of the fighting and everything, we were laughing, at the game on Sunday night. Number 86, Lee Smith, he's on the Raiders, and he was basically, headbutting as a joke. He was just kidding around with a player and that he knew on the other team. And so he basically just with his helmet, and the other guy just kind of casually pulled him off. And if you saw it, you'd know that there was no intent, no malicious anything. But the ref gives him 15 yards, throws a penalty, and we could hear it on TV where basically said, but I was kidding. I was just joking, ref. And we looked up, we're like, did he just say that? So, but helmet to helmet fun is a 15-yard penalty. So he even said that at his locker. They gave him the post interview, and he's like, you guys never interview me. And the fact that you have to interview me for this, he goes, I lost my mind for a minute. He goes, I think I owe Derek Carr a beer. He says, I can't believe I actually did that, and I'm just glad it didn't cost us points, and we could still pull out the game. He said, but I was just joking around, and he goes, they're so sensitive now. So that was a funny moment for me. But there was a time in one of the games this weekend where Tony Romo was the announcer, and he kind of there was a sidestep, and I actually don't remember the game. I just know he was an announcer, and there was a sidestep where one of the defenders was basically not making a tackle, and so it looked like he was going to the side. He wanted to make the tackle. He really didn't make the tackle. And Tony Romo said something to the effect, "Oh, it looked almost Deion Sanders-like." And, I couldn't stop laughing, because if you ever watched Deion Sanders in the late 80s and 90s, he basically didn't tackle. I mean, he was a cornerback in several teams that chased a ring. Obviously, he's in the Hall of Fame. And, I think he's actually pretty terrible on TV, but, he loves himself quite a bit. But Tony called him out. And you just know, if you're going to call out another player and you haven't won anything like a Super Bowl, or, I think Tony Romo's won 2 playoff games, but he's a phenomenal guy in the media. And he has such a high football IQ where, he knows what he's talking about. But I was sitting there, listening to this with my husband, and we just started laughing, because there was just a joke back then where you just knew that, you weren't going to get tackling from Deion Sanders. He actually had a quote that he said, somebody asked Troy Aikman about that when he was a Cowboy, and said, Deion isn't out there tackling or anything. And he said, well, he tells us it's a business decision. And if you know anything about Deion Sanders, very famous, defensive back, cornerback, but he also played baseball, and he was all over the place, and he calls himself Prime. He loves Showtime, and is just somebody that was really all about the flash and his stats. And did he make plays? Was he, was he in the league a long time, and did he earn his gold jacket? Yeah, I mean, he did. There's no question. But he just got really sensitive on NFL Network on, post-game yesterday, where he goes, "Tony, I can't believe you called me out. I can't believe you did that." And it was really just Tony Romo being funny. But then on the post-game show that he was on, he said something to the effect of, let me see if I can remember the quote. He just said, "Hey, I got a gold jacket and I didn't buy it." He said, "Oh, and Dak says hi, by the way." Now, that's just mean. We all know that Dak Prescott, took over the job for Tony Romo, and when he got hurt with his back, and he basically never looked back. Once Dak was in, that was it. They didn't give him his job back, but he's doing great in the media, and just for Deion Sanders, he needs to lighten up. It was a funny moment. Let it pass. How many times have you said something about Tony Romo when there's been, non-plays made or anything like that? So I just think that he needs to just lighten up. But it's just funny when you see those two, former players just get in all these fights or I should say war of words, and it really was nothing meant by it. Everybody's just so sensitive now that, everybody just kind of says things that just kind of crack me up a little bit. So we just, we want to be just really interested, just really keep a lookout for, some of these fights. We had a full moon over the weekend. Maybe that had something that went on it. But talking about WTF moments in the league, I mean, we just had so many just unbelievable things when it came to some of the really tough, and rough and tumble guys out there. I mean, throwing punches and, grabbing guys around the neck, and and actually one play that was really good. That was a WTF. I'm just sitting there watching the game, and watching the Kansas City game, and Kansas City is one that's beat the Cowboys forever. And so all of a sudden I look up, and it was basically the first half. There was no time left. And so you just knew there was 1 second, and you just knew that Alex Smith was going to try a Hail Mary. Well, apparently we were wrong, and Alex had other ideas. He just basically does a short pass to Tyreek Hill, Mr. Speedster, and he had the Le'Veon Bell, weight and patience, and you saw all the defenders were in the end zone because they were waiting for that, Hail Mary. And he just looked once, looked twice, looked to the right, kind of bobbed and weaved his way, and went in for a touchdown. There was no time left on the clock. They missed him completely. And he, and you're just like, oh my God, did that actually just happen? So that was actually a pretty funny moment. No matter, if you want Kansas City to win or not, if you're a Steelers fan listening to this, you had to look at that 57-yard touchdown to end the first half and think, Nobody expected that. That was very cool. So just one of the kind of cool moments there in the league. And then, of course, we did have, two quarterbacks that were drafted in the 2016 draft. And I have to shout them out because WTF, guys, you were just balling on the field. And that would be Jared Goff and Carson Wentz. They both threw for 4 touchdowns this past weekend. Both scored 51 points for their team and for wins. And they just absolutely did a phenomenal job. And, it's really nice to see that, the second young guys coming in, the second wave, that they've got some talent. And, we were a little bit concerned with Goff because when he was, with the Rams and under Jeff Fisher, he wasn't doing so hot. But, this new young coach in LA, he's doing a great job. And it was fun to watch. So there's a lot of things going on this weekend, a lot of WTF moments, mostly fights, that I just couldn't pass up. I had to let you know about it. And, just some other things that happened. And hopefully you appreciate some of those moments. But we are headed to a game with Indianapolis this coming weekend. And so I'm excited for that. And hopefully we can run over them. One of the things that, who they just played, I think the New York Giants just, when they played this weekend, the team they played against basically said they wanted to embarrass them. Well, they did. I'm actually hoping we do that with the Colts. We need a game that just kind of solidifies us as the number one in the AFC. We are, not just in our division, but and I say we, and I know Joe doesn't like it when I do that, but the Steelers, I say we because I feel like they're my team, they're our team. We're part of them. They're part of us. They just do a great job, really being involved with the fans. But we need to have some kind of a game that just is one of those 50-point games. I would love to see that, 50 burger out, and we'd all be like, WTF, we are the team to beat. So I'm excited for the weekend, and hopefully you are too. Well, I'm going to let you go. I'm actually coming with my travel schedule. I'm in Dallas right now, and so on business, and so I'm going to go ahead and let you go. But be safe, be good, and until next week. And also check out our WTF article, which I'll have up tomorrow with a couple other tidbits in there, and you'll be able to see some of the references to the interesting rough and tumble moments we had this weekend because Joe's great with the graphics. So thank you again for listening in, folks, and make it a great week.
We would like to thank you for listening and remind our listeners to follow us on social media and our website, www.steelcityunderground.com.